Hey, what's up? It's Anthony Marley Love. Welcome to our Traveling While Black Across America series, Volume 2.
Yes, and Volume 2 is all about the Oregon coast. So we're going to showcase the Oregon coast to you all, and we cannot wait. And we're starting right here in Coos Bay, Oregon.
Yeah, so come along with us to check it out.
When it comes to black history in Oregon, let's just say it hasn't been kind to black folks. Take the story of Marcus Lopez, the first known black man to set foot in what would become Oregon. He arrived at Tillamook Bay in 1788 with merchant sea captain Robert Gray. The brother didn't even make it a day. He was killed during a conflict with local Native Americans.
Lopez's tragic fate set the tone for what will become a harsh history for black people in Oregon, marked by its infamous black exclusion laws. But that history doesn't change the fact that Oregon's coast is home to some of the most breathtaking scenery you'll find anywhere. And despite that past, everyone has the right to experience it.
For the next volume of our TWB Across America road trip series, we listened to our community and hit the road to explore the iconic Oregon coast. Starting in Seattle, we made our way down to Coos Bay and rolled up Highway 101, ending in Astoria, making sure to take in as much of its world-renowned beauty as possible, while attempting to uncover any hidden gems along the way.
This trip will be a whole different vibe from our last road trip adventure, for so many reasons, from the landscapes and unique geography to the variety of activities waiting to be explored.
Even Oregon's complex history with black people meant we had to adjust our rating scale for this journey. It wasn't the same adventure as before, but if you loved our first Across America road trip series, you can bet that some things won't change for Volume 2.
We can't wait to show you the beauty, the magic, and the awe of the Oregon coast. Join us on Traveling While Black Across America Road Trip Series, Volume 2. Coos Bay is our first stop on our Oregon coast road trip. The city reflects its Native American roots more so than any other city we'll visit on this trip. That's because it's named after the original inhabitants of the area, the Coos tribe.
The Coos people, like many of the indigenous tribes on the coast, benefited from the area's abundant seafood and timber resources. Not surprising that European settlers would also benefit from those same resources, especially timber.
Yes, especially timber. In fact, it was America's booming timber industry that blew Coos Bay up in the late 19th and early 20th century. During that time, Coos Bay was a shipping and logging hub that fueled its economic growth. As you will see, those remnants are still visible around the city today.
Although, even with its abundant resources, the region may have never gotten that far in development if it wasn't for the construction of a structure that can now be seen all up and down the coast, a lighthouse. See, during the 19th century, Coos Bay's rocky location on Oregon's coast was infamous for numerous shipwrecks.
Finally, in 1866, the Cape Arago Lighthouse was built, and right away the number of shipwrecks in the area were significantly reduced.
The reduction in shipwrecks allowed Coos Bay to be established as a reliable hub and attract businesses and settlers to the region.
Like others that line the Oregon coast, the Cape Arago Lighthouse still stands today, and while it was decommissioned in 2006, it stands as a reminder that if not for these structures, trade and industry would be impossible. Also, they do make the scenery more beautiful.
In Coos Bay, the lighthouses aren't the only thing that contribute to the scenic beauty. The city's proximity to Oregon's unique landscapes make it a great destination for outdoor activities. One of those unique landscapes is the iconic Oregon Dunes.
Coos Bay is actually known as the gateway to the Oregon Dunes. We'll be showing more of the dunes in our next episode, where we stopped on the way to Newport, Oregon. But for this episode, we were excited to be checking out the largest city on the Oregon coast and putting it up to all of our scales.
Considering what we heard about the beauty of Oregon coast, for this road trip series, we are just as excited for the drive in between destinations. And even though our first leg of the series coming from Seattle wasn't technically on the coast, it surprisingly held its own on the journey. Drive grade. For this episode only, we are going to explain our expanded drive grade rating scale.
Starting with our last road trip series, we launched our expanded rating scales for all of our categories, going from a 5-point scale to a 10-point scale, allowing for us to add more context for why we are rating experiences the way we are.
For drive grade, we broke it down like this: the quality of the views along the route, the quality of access to gas stations and restaurants along the route, or what we call roadside amenities, the easiness of the route, or in other words, the route doesn't require a lot of highway switching or worse, traffic. The quality and or amount of roadside attractions that entice one to pull off along the route. Finally, you already know, we're gonna grade the quality of the parking. Hopefully there are a lot of options for parking, and the more free options, the better.
The first leg of our drive would start in Seattle with an average drive time that should take a little over 6.5 hours. But you already know that our Across America road trips are not your average road trip because we always look for interesting stops along the way.
Yes, interesting stops that we call roadside attractions. But before we break down the score we gave in that regard, let's start with the difficulty of the route. The route was the longest of the trip and requires the most highways, neither of which are terrible. I-5 South to State Highway 38 West to get to US Route 101 wasn't too difficult. But since this is one leg of 3 others, we have to take all into account.
Since the others by default only require traveling straight up US Route 101, we're only going to give 1 point for route difficulty. The same thinking goes into our scoring in regard to quality of views. This first leg, there are a couple of gems, especially if you're lucky enough to catch Mount Rainier out. But compared to the other legs in the series, the views on this leg are a bit forgotten.
Since 2 hours and 40 minutes of the ride is through our home-based state of Washington, we'll give 1 point for views. But here's where the leg holds its own compared to the others. First, roadside amenities. Not once during this leg between Seattle and Coos Bay were we worried about not seeing a gas station.
Yes, there are plenty of gas stations and as well as restaurants and coffee shops in case we need to grab some fuel for ourselves. So we can easily give the full 2 points for roadside amenities. And the word abundance can also be used when describing the amount of roadside attractions.
Just in the part of the drive through Washington, we passed through some really dope places that we've actually covered on our channel. And some of those places invoke some pretty significant Black history.
Now, only about 15 minutes from Olympia maybe is the city of Tumwater, and it's very interesting.
So the story goes, there was a man named George Bush. Not that George Bush, a different George Bush. He was a free Black man that was living in Missouri. When he heard about the opportunity that was out here in the Pacific Northwest, he wanted to take his chance and see if he could strike it rich as well. So he packed up his family and he headed out west to arrive in the state that we're headed to, Oregon. In Oregon, he was met with the Black Exclusionary laws.
So the Black Exclusionary laws are basically where Black people, they weren't allowed to be in the Oregon Territory. No Blacks were allowed, and they were in the Oregon Territory, and there were things called lash laws where they would get so many lashes for however many days they were in the Oregon Territory. So when George Bush found this out, him and his family left Oregon Territory and went to Washington State.
When they got to Washington State, George Bush founded a town that is still in existence today, and that town is called Tumwater.
And not too far down the road, a man named George Washington,
Not that George Washington.
another Black man named George Washington, founded the town of Centralia.
So, Black men from Missouri founding towns in Washington is somewhat of a trend in the state. If you want to find out more, take a look at our YouTube channel. We do have an episode where we took a trip to Centralia.
This leg also took us through Olympia, Washington, the first state capital of the trip.
Also on this leg, we hit our second state capital along the way, Salem, Oregon. But Salem stood out because it was the first state capitol building in any of our series that didn't have a dome. And considering the state's history, it was most definitely an interesting design choice.
Nope, there's no dome. But should we be surprised? For a state that started out being established as the white man's Mecca, would have a white man on top of their Capitol building instead.
Interesting.
The Oregon part of this leg does feature 2 things that are known to be great in Oregon. In Salem, we encountered the first of the 2.
One thing here in Oregon, the food truck scene is very unique here.
Not only did we find delicious food at the food truck spot we chose in Salem, but we also found a Black-owned business.
The capital of the state of Oregon, we're at a Black-owned restaurant called JoJo's Soul Food and Memphis Barbecue. Be sure to check them out if you're ever in town.
Yeah, we can't wait. Try all this good food.
The other great Oregon feature the route showcases is its spectacular access to nature. Not too far outside of the state capitol, we stopped at a viewpoint to get a glimpse of one of the best parks in the state.
Hey everyone, we are at the Willamette Valley Viewpoint right outside Silver Falls State Park in Oregon, and it's pretty cool.
Silver Falls State Park is the largest of the 5 state parks right here in Oregon. It's known for gorgeous waterfalls, historic buildings, and a beautiful temperate rainforest.
It's a rainforest in Oregon. It's pretty awesome.
A lot like Washington.
This leg of the road trip also includes the chance to experience a little bit of the Oregon academic culture. We pulled off in Eugene, Oregon to visit the University of Oregon, where we headed to one of the most popular spots on campus.
We're right here on the campus of University of Oregon, standing in front of their football stadium. If you haven't heard, they got a pretty good football team.
Eugene seems like a really chill college town. Food spots look pretty good as well. I wish you could stay longer.
With all these amazing options for roadside attractions, there's no surprise that we're giving 2 points in this category.
We can give both points for parking in Coos Bay as well. The whole time, it was free parking. A great sign for Coos Bay, just like the grade for the first leg of this road trip series.
The total tally of the points brings the total drive grade score to an 8 out of 10. Wow, that's really good, and we didn't even drive the coast yet.
Although we didn't get to drive the coast, Coos Bay will be our first experience on the Oregon coast. We were really excited to see how it would stack up against our level of fun scale.
Level of fun. Once again, for this episode only, we're going to explain our expanded level of fun rating scale. For our 10-point level of fun rating, we will be considering the amount and quality of activities offered within the vicinity of the location, the variety of activities that apply to the different visitor demographics. And what we mean by this is, are the activities better suited for couples, singles, or families? Are they more suited for younger or older folks? And we are also taking into account the quality of restaurant options, the affordability of the area. Finally, are there any special events happening during our visit?
Coos Bay was the perfect destination for being the first stop on this road trip series. Not only for its obvious location being at the southern tip of the state, also it embodies a lot of what makes the Oregon coast special.
When comparing Coos Bay to our level of fun scale, it's very important to what exactly those things are. For example, starting with the quality of activities, it's easy to see that access to nature and the outdoors is a huge component.
Even the place we stayed during our time in Coos Bay was built around connecting guests to the beauty and peacefulness of Oregon's coast, Bay Point Landing.
Bay Point Landing is what we would describe as a nature getaway resort situated on the coast. The property combines modern luxury with upscale amenities.
But what's really cool about Bay Point Landing is how guests can choose how they want to stay. The property offers sleek cabins, stylish airstreams. They even have RV hookups.
For our stay, we chose to stay in their stylish cabins, and it was super cozy. And the s'mores kits that were provided made our nights just as fun as our days spent in the city.
Of course, great access to nature and beaches can also be had in the city outside of the Bay Point Landing property. That's because Coos Bay offers a lot of awesome parks.
Yes, parks like Mingus Park, a popular park that features a Japanese garden and walking trails, all making it a great place for a relaxing stroll. But if you're looking for more adventure, there are also a couple state parks nearby. No matter which one you choose to check out, once again, you're sure to experience everything that makes the Oregon coast.
Right now, we're in Short Acres State Park.
This state park is beautiful. It has wonderful views of the Oregon coastline, great hiking trails, and also a serene botanical garden.
As you can see, if you love the outdoors, Coos Bay is a great option. But what if you're looking for something else? For a place that celebrated its 150-year anniversary last year, history nerds like myself will love learning about Coos history all over town, like at its popular Coos Bay Boardwalk.
Coos Bay also has some really cool looking museums, like the Coos Bay History Museum that covers the cultural and maritime history of Coos Bay and Oregon's South Coast as a whole. And the Coos Bay Art Museum is another cool museum that represents Coos Bay's up-and-coming art scene.
Although to me, the coolest part about Coos Bay history is that it is the birthplace and hometown of legendary long-distance runner Steve Prefontaine. Not surprisingly, there are many tributes dedicated to the legendary runner all over town.
Yes, Coos Bay doesn't disappoint. They even have a casino for those of us who love to do a little gambling. Yes, the abundance and variety of activities within and around Coos Bay is why we can give all 2 points for quality of activities.
The abundance of variety is why we can also give all 2 points for demographic applicability. Yep, people of all ages and variety of interests would have an easy time finding something fun to do within Coos Bay.
And that goes the same for food within Coos Bay. Food and wine nerds like myself would love the great tasting food and drink options. But our favorite restaurant experience in Coos Bay, and possibly the trip overall, was at Restaurant O.
Yes, who knew that one could find fine dining curated by a world-renowned chef in downtown Coos Bay? See, Restaurant O is owned and operated by Master Chef Owen O'Neill. Let's just say that this guy is no joke. After graduating summa cum laude with a degree in culinary arts in Canterbury, England, Chef O'Neill worked in kitchens all around Europe, including London, Paris, and Sardinia, Italy, just to name a few.
Finally, in 2017, Chef O'Neill moved to Coos Bay, Oregon, and opened up Restaurant O. While Chef O'Neill specializes in Italian and French cuisine, his restaurant also offers a wide variety of local and international dishes. Also, what's most interesting to me about Chef O'Neill is that he was once featured as a contestant on the Food Network's hit show Beat Bobby Flay. Super cool.
It shouldn't be a surprise to know that Chef O'Neill was also a good friend of the late, great Anthony Bourdain. Yes, if you're in Coos Bay, you have to stop by and check out Restaurant O. We will definitely be back.
The Restaurant O experience alone is why we can give both points for quality of restaurants in Coos Bay, and the perfect scores only continued when looking at affordability. In comparison to most places on the West Coast, Coos Bay is extremely affordable.
It was actually the most affordable destination on this road trip series, and another reason why this would be a great destination for families. The only category Coos Bay didn't receive a perfect score was for special events. See, while they do offer a pretty fun looking festival called the Bay Area Fun Festival that takes place every September, there's not much more that stands out after that. So we'll only give 1 point here.
Still, with only getting 1 point in the special events category, Coos Bay's level of fun score is still really impressive when you tally up the points. So for Coos Bay, we can give a 9 out of 10 for our level of fun grade overall.
Wow. Based on the drive and level of fun grades, Coos Bay is definitely not a bad start for our road trip series. But how does the city stack up against our comfort scale?
You mean our Oregon comfort scale, right?
Right. In our Comfortability for Black People segment, we'll explain what that means.
Comfortability for Black people. Oregon's complex history in regard to Black people has ultimately led to the state's current low Black population. Therefore, we knew that if we wanted to more accurately evaluate our experiences and destinations within the state, we would have to adjust how we calculate our Comfortability for Black people rating for this journey.
This was not a problem. See, this updated scale is still simple, but more effective for destinations within a state like Oregon. While we kept factors like our personal experiences, the number of Black people seen, and artifacts of inclusion, we made 2 swaps. We replaced Black history and Black population numbers with the diversity in the destination's marketing and the quality of access to local cultural resource groups.
Although we will give you a heads up that while the scale criteria has changed, the scores on this series are not at the level we usually see on destinations we feature on our show. Still, our personal experiences within all these destinations were positive.
What's great about our new scale is that the 2 new criteria is something that the people running the cities can directly influence. So to improve the score, ironically, while Black history was one of the 2 removed criteria for this road trip series, Coos Bay actually has some pretty significant and tragic history involving a Black resident.
That Black resident's name was Alonzo Tucker. He was a businessman and boxer. Alonzo was lynched by a white mob in Coos Bay. When the local newspaper reported on the incident, it became the only documented lynching in Oregon.
Thanks to an effort led by Taylor Stewart, founder of the Remembrance Project, the Alonzo Tucker Historical Marker stands outside the Coos History Museum.
The erection of Alonzo Tucker's plaque and the city's acknowledgement of such a horrific event shows that there is at least an effort being made, and is why we will give a point to Coos Bay for visibility of artifacts of inclusion.
Now look, that's a bit of a reach, because outside of that, there wasn't much. But when you see the final tally, you'll understand why the reach was much needed in order to bring the score closer to reflecting our personal comfort.
And that wasn't the only reach, giving 1 point in diversity and destination marketing because the Coos Bay Adventure Guide features 1 Black and 1 Hispanic person.
Shout out to the Bay Point Landing for their willingness to contribute to our series. Perhaps they will influence the rest of Coos Bay's marketing decision makers to follow along in promotion of inclusive travel.
We can also give a point for access to local cultural research groups, being that it is the home base for the tribal government of Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw.
But after that, there were no more points to squeeze out for Coos Bay, because we didn't see any other Black people during our time in Coos Bay. So we'll give 0 points for Black people seen.
The great thing for us was we didn't have to reach that far or squeeze that hard for points in regard to our personal comfort, because we can absolutely give both points here.
Yeah, our personal comfort was pretty high during our time in Coos Bay. It was truly a pleasure meeting friendly people at the Bay Point Landing and throughout the spots we dropped into throughout the town, like Restaurant O. Be sure to keep that in mind when you're seeing our final comfortability score.
So for Coos Bay, based on our scale, we give a 5 out of 10 for comfortability for Black people.
Yes, we enjoyed our experience overall in Coos Bay, and our scales reflect as much. Well, at least the first two. Either way, we can't wait to show you more of the state we visited as a part of this road trip series.
We can't say enough how Coos Bay was such a great start to our Oregon Coast road trip. While we were excited, we were just as nervous if the other destinations could live up to what we just experienced.
Either way, we were about to find out. Next stop, Newport, Oregon.
Coos Bay was a perfect start to our Oregon Coast road trip. And since the rest of our trip would be along the coast, we were confident that the best was yet to come.
Our next Oregon Coast destination was the city of Newport. On paper, Newport is similar to Coos Bay solely by their proximity to the coast. But beyond that, these two coastal cities have completely different vibes.
While Coos Bay felt like a quiet, laid-back coastal town that was more conducive to travelers looking to get away from the busyness of life and connect to nature and outdoors, Newport, on the other hand, provides a lot more of a touristy feel.
And we mean touristy. But this isn't something that we think the town is ashamed of, because in fact, since its establishment, it has always had a connection to attracting tourists.
Just like in Coos Bay, and no different than everywhere in America, before European disruption, the land that would become Newport was home to indigenous peoples. These people were known as the Alsea people.
Newport was founded in 1866. Its location on Yaquina Bay played a huge role in its development, as it has allowed for local shipping, logging, and fishing industries to thrive.
But soon after its establishment, Newport right away became most known for tourism, earning a reputation as a place for recreation and relaxation. It quickly became a popular destination for settlers seeking a coastal escape.
Newport today still flourishes on the economies of at least two of those industries that helped it thrive in its early days of establishment. The commercial fishing industry, as Newport is still considered to be one of the most important ports on the Oregon coast, contributing to its nickname as the Dungeness crab capital of the world. And of course, its tourism industry.
Yes, tourism is definitely a major part of Newport. In 2012, tourism contributed approximately $133.8 million to Lincoln County's economy, with Newport being a primary destination for visitors. And its revenue has continued to grow no matter the economic climate.
Tourism is a huge contributor to the state of Oregon overall, and it makes a lot of sense why out-of-state income would have a major impact on a state with such a low population density. Think about this. Oregon is 29% larger than our home state of Washington, but Washington's population is 85% larger than Oregon's. Wow. Well, sorry, I digress.
What was most important is that we were excited to be experiencing the best of what both had to offer within the town: great seafood and fun experiences.
So we loaded up the car and checked out of Bay Point Landing to hit the highway out of Coos Bay and head to the city of Newport, the second city on our TWB Across America Road Trip Series, Volume 2.
Drive grade. We were really looking forward to this leg of the drive because we will be driving up the actual coast. Along with the spectacular sights, driving the coast would be freeing in itself, thanks to Oregon Beach Bill of 1967.
Oregon Beach Bill 1967 guarantees free and unrestricted access of every beach, from the sand to the vegetation line, to everyone.
Yes, the freedom, the views, the roadside attractions. We just knew everything would be spectacular.
But even with going in with high hopes, there was still a small voice in our heads that we set our bar of expectation too high. We've already seen some spectacular views traveling other parts of the Pacific Northwest. Just how awesome could the Oregon coast be?
The leg of the drive from Coos Bay to Newport was a lot shorter than our first leg, coming in at 2 hours and 6 minutes. Well, minus our pit stops, of course.
This drive will be the second shortest on the road trip series, minus our pit stops, of course. And since it was a straight shot north up US 101, it was easy to get both points in regard to route difficulty.
A common theme on this road trip up the Oregon coast is that a short distance drive does not equate to lower quality of views. The views on this leg of the drive were unbelievable.
These amazing views are due a lot in part to Oregon's rugged coastal landscape. Seeing dramatic views, large waves, continuously crashing rocky cliffs silhouetted against the beautiful vast sky never gets old.
It was an easy 2 points for quality of views, and how we scored quality of roadside attractions reflects that there were some pretty amazing stops to take them all in, like our first stop, which was a pull-off within the state park, and that was a view all in itself.
We're pulled off at an Oregon coast hidden gem, the Umpqua River Lighthouse, which is still home to the U.S. Coast Guard.
Also, we're in Winchester Bay, and it's called like the Salmon Harbor, where there's lots of great salmon and also prime whale watching as well. And there's even a jawbone of a big humpback whale.
You know, it's pretty interesting. Living in Washington, we've gotten to see orcas. We have yet to see a gray whale. Maybe we might see one.
We'll see.
But one of the most intriguing pit stops on this leg of the drive was not spectacular because of views alone. It was spectacular just being in it. I'm talking about the Oregon Dunes.
Known as the Oregon Dunes National Recreation Area, is the largest expanse of coastal and sand dunes in North America, spanning over 40 miles along the coast.
We're at the Oregon Dunes on the Oregon coast, and this is the trail at the Oregon Dunes Day Use Area.
Look, we always associated dunes with deserts. But here in Oregon, on the coast, because of the way the Pacific Ocean hits the coast, it pushes all the sand up, creating these unbelievable large landscape of dunes.
Yes, the National Recreational Area provides a variety of great ways to experience the dunes, from hiking trails for visitors looking to peacefully stroll while taking in the nature, to even designated areas for off-road vehicles looking for a rush.
Here's an important tip if you ever do make the great decision to visit Oregon Dunes National Recreation Area.
Message!
So our GPS kept taking us to a weird location, so we thought, because where it put us was where we needed to be, and that was at the U.S. Forest Service building. See, because while the Oregon Dunes National Recreation Area is not technically a park, you still need to purchase a park's pass.
Yes, a cost. But the friendly park rangers on the inside hooked us up with a great pass option that allowed us to access parks throughout the rest of our trip. And the price made it a great deal. Along with the natural scenery, the route does showcase some pretty dope man-made aesthetics.
Yes, like monuments that commemorate the area's fishing and maritime history. One of the towns we stopped in used its unique architecture to define itself, Yachats, which is described as a charming coastal village that offers visitors a tranquil escape.
It was cool. We just grabbed something to eat and then got back on the road so to get to Newport before we ran out of sunlight. There's no suspense in that, so we get full 2 points for quality of roadside attractions.
There were 2 criteria for the drive that we did take a point away for. Roadside amenities was 1 due to the fact that there were a couple spots along the route where there is a lot of distance between seeing a gas station or anything for that matter, so be sure to fill up.
Unfortunately, parking was the other. Not only was there borderline no free parking options in the whole town of Newport, but not too long before our visit, the city had just raised parking prices. The dope views and amazing roadside attraction is the only reason we still give parking 1 point.
Even with taking the hit in parking and roadside amenities, the total still gets this leg of the road trip a really great final grade. We give it 8 out of 10 for drive grade.
So the second leg of our road trip series held the bar from the first leg, and if it wasn't for the pay for parking price hike situation, it would have done better. Message!
But would it hold the bar the same for level of fun? We already knew that the type of experience was going to be totally different from Coos Bay.
Level of fun. As soon as we entered into Newport, we could tell that it was going to be a totally different experience. But could the experience be better than what we just enjoyed in Coos Bay? Better yet, would the level of fun scale say so?
Possibly the best indicator of how fun a place can be is measuring its quality of fun activities. so it's a great sign that we notice right away Newport has fun activities in large quantity and variety.
If one was feeling in the mood to go all out touristy, then hanging out in Newport's historic bayfront is the way to go. There you are engulfed in everything that makes Newport, well, Newport. From it being a working dock, supporting its thriving local crab industry, demonstrating why Newport is considered the Dungeness crab capital of the world, to providing stunning views of the state's most beautiful landmark, the Yaquina Bridge.
And that's not even the fun touristy stuff.
Hey everyone, I hope you can hear me. We are at the Newport dock, at the Sea Lion dock to be specific, and it's where sea lions come from all over, and they're obviously very loud, they communicate, and it's really cool. It's a free attraction that we recommend everybody come check out.
Yes, on the historic bayfront, visitors will be surrounded by tons of storefronts, colorful murals, and all-around energetic vibes.
There's something for everyone, even those who have interests that some would describe as, well, unique.
Look, I'm not gonna lie. Growing up, I used to love watching Ripley's Believe It or Not. And some of the stuff we seen on this trip, we can't believe it.
We even stumbled upon Aquarium Village, a really unique area that feels a little off the beaten path.
Now, if one happened to be looking for a more laid-back, refined tourist experience that connects to Newport's art culture, Nye Beach would be the spot to hang.
Here in the central part of the city of Newport is the historic Nye Beach District. This district houses a lot of the art and culture of the city.
But one of the best tourist attractions in Newport is one even the locals take advantage in having access to, the Oregon Coast Aquarium.
Considered to be one of the top aquariums in the country, this amazing aquarium showcases the diverse marine life of the Pacific Northwest via interactive exhibits.
And we mean interactive.
This aquarium is pretty dope because you can actually touch the animals.
Yes, we definitely enjoyed our time visiting the aquarium, and we could see why it's considered one of the best in the United States.
Newport provides one final activity flex, as it can even provide an option for tourists looking to connect to nature, the Newport Way.
The Yaquina Bay State Recreation Area is a park in Newport that offers beach access and stunning views of the ocean. But the main attraction within is definitely the historic Yaquina Bay Lighthouse.
The lighthouse is historic. Built in 1871, it is the oldest standing structure in Newport and the last wooden lighthouse in the state. That's pretty good for only being an active lighthouse for 3 years.
Today, the Yaquina Bay Lighthouse is a museum that's open for tours, but we didn't go in because locals say that it's haunted, and no thanks.
Yep, no need to risk an unwanted ghost experience after Newport's uncanny display of fun options already. It was more than enough for us to give both points in regards to quality of activities.
Also demonstrated was Newport's ability to appeal to a variety of visitor demographics, young to old, group trip, romantic trip, solo trip. There's something in Newport for you, so 2 points for demographic applicability.
If over 150 years in the tourist business taught Newport anything, it's tourists love to eat. Newport provides plenty of options, and wherever you choose, you can't go wrong with the seafood.
So it's no surprise that Newport has access to some amazing seafood, just like Moe's, that has some amazing clam chowder. It was at a restaurant named Merrill's that we had a more upscale Newport seafood experience. Our experience at both of these locations was enough to warrant both points in regards to quality of restaurants.
Special events is where Newport outscores Coos Bay. It is no surprise that the touristy town will host one of the largest annual festivals on the Oregon coast, the Newport Seafood and Wine Festival.
Amazing seafood and wine? Sign me up. We'll have to find a way to come back for this.
Unfortunately, where Newport can't hold up against Coos Bay is in affordability. I guess over 150 years in the tourism business also taught Newport that tourists are going to pay.
Yes, Newport was pricier than what we were paying in Coos Bay, still less expensive in comparison to other West Coast touristy cities, so just 1 point for affordability.
Even with taking a hit in affordability, Newport still comes through with a great overall score, coming in at 9 out of 10 for level of fun. These near-perfect fun scores can't keep up, can they? Or can they?
Well, it's great that the level of fun scores remain high. Our expectation for the comfortability score might not be as such. Comfortability for Black people. As a reminder, for this series, we are using a modified comfort scale, keeping most things the same, just swapping out prevalence of Black history and Black population numbers with the diversity and destinations marketing and the quality of access to local cultural resource groups.
The modified scale didn't result in Coos Bay coming out with a spectacular score, but it did align with an accurate illustration of our positive experience and a destination within a state like Oregon. So, how did Newport do?
Once again, in regard to personal feelings of comfort during our visit, we can honestly give both points. But to be honest, a lot of those positive feelings were because of a chance encounter with a family member. My uncle and aunt, longtime Portland residents, previously unbeknownst to me, make Newport an annual anniversary celebration destination.
Yes, it is always great seeing family. But outside of those beautiful people, we did see a couple other black visitors, a sight we hadn't seen in Coos Bay. So we'll give 2 points for black people seen.
We can give 1 point for access to local cultural resource groups because of Newport's Arcuries Cultural Center, a center focused on supporting underserved Latinx, Guatemalan, and indigenous Mesoamerican populations in Lincoln County.
Unfortunately, Newport struggles against our scales from here on. We didn't notice any of the usual artifacts of inclusion, like all our welcome signs, BLM posters, or pride flags, so we can't give any points here.
Same in regard to diversity and destination marketing, not really much from what we could see.
Now, if we were using our original scale, we possibly could have gave Newport a point for black history. See, we found out about a popular local historical figure in the nearby town of Waldport. To say his story was interesting would be an understatement, because considering what we know about Oregon's history makes his story seem impossible.
July 4th, 1830, Louis Southworth was born into slavery in Tennessee. Though he was born on the day his country celebrated Independence Day, freedom would not come for him until years later, and he would have to work to buy it.
Louis lived an adventurous life, working a wide array of different jobs to earn his freedom, from panning for gold to playing violin for local dancing schools. After purchasing his freedom, Louis eventually ended up in Oregon, moving to a homestead near Waldport. How did he manage to own property and live in an exclusionary state, you ask? By taking advantage of the Homestead Act, which had no race restrictions.
Louis would become a lifelong resident within the area. During his time, he operated a ferry carrying passengers and cargo across the Alsea River. Louis Southworth died in 1917 at the age of 86. His legacy had such an impact on the area, the town of Waldport honored his legacy with a bronze sculpture and a park named after him.
Pretty dope. But unfortunately, we aren't using the old scale. But maybe we'll make a return trip to Waldport in the future.
Still, even with the miss on the latter two criteria, Newport's total score comes to what is seemingly to be a respectable score for these Oregon towns. Based upon our scale, once again, we give a 5 out of 10 for comfortability for black people. Overall, we absolutely enjoyed our time in Newport, continuing our great road trip experience so far.
In less than 500 miles, we've already experienced an enormous amount of spectacular views and encountered some unbelievable wildlife.
What else is great is that the first two destinations have given us two totally different Oregon coast experiences. We couldn't imagine how good it could get, considering that our next destination will be combining the escape to nature experience of Coos Bay with the touristy notoriety of Newport.
These near-perfect fun scores can't keep getting any better, can they? Or can they? We were ready to find out. On to the iconic Cannon Beach.
The next stop on our Oregon Coast road trip is arguably the most famous destination of the series and in the world, evidenced by being ranked among the most beautiful beaches in the world by National Geographic and a constant featured location for movies. Some of those movies being legendary. And then of course there's the main attraction, the iconic Haystack Rock.
Underneath all the hoopla, Cannon Beach is a laid-back beach destination known for its charming restaurants, boutique shops, art galleries, and yes, of course, the iconic Haystack Rocks. Having experienced the chill-paced nature Oregon coastal destination, then a turned-up touristy Oregon coastal destination, we were really interested in the opportunity that Cannon Beach would be mixing the laid-back nature with the touristy notoriety.
While a great art scene and breathtaking nature will be a recurring theme, Cannon Beach attracts a different type of tourism than Newport. The upscale shops, fine dining restaurants, against the backdrop of a gorgeous beach, all lend to a more of a romantic vibe.
Ah, that's sweet. But when I heard the word upscale, I saw points draining from Cannon Beach's affordability score. In all honesty, putting the level of fun scale against the destination we went into with high expectations was intriguing within itself.
but perhaps not as intriguing as Cannon Beach's transformation throughout history.
Dating back thousands of years, the Clatsop and Tillamook tribes called home the area that would become Cannon Beach. They relied on fishing and hunting, the abundant fish and other wildlife, as well as trade.
In fact, it was trade that attracted William Clark of the Lewis and Clark expedition to visit the area to meet with local tribes in 1806. It wouldn't be until the late 1890s that the area would become known as Cannon Beach, but the story of how it got its name began in 1846.
In 1846, a U.S. Navy schooner, the USS Shark, which had been sent to the Pacific Northwest to assert American presence in the disputed territory, ran into some trouble trying to navigate the treacherous sandbars of the Columbia River. That day, the crew found out why the sandbar became known as Graveyard of the Pacific. The ship broke apart and sank. Though the crew escaped with their lives, any remnants of the ship was lost to the sea, including the ship's cannons.
Fast forward to the 1890s when one of the cannons from the wreckage was discovered after it had washed upon the shore. That cannon would be the inspiration for the name given to the town. The city wouldn't officially incorporate until 1956, which was influenced by an influx in tourism dollars thanks to the development of Ecola State Park in 1932, officially kicking off Cannon Beach's transformation from small fishing and logging village to hot tourist destination.
In Cannon Beach, we were determined to experience a little bit of everything it had to offer. Its art, its nature, its romance.
And for the third time, we packed up our car, hit the gas, and left Newport in the rear view. We were off to Cannon Beach, the third city on our TWB Across America Road Trip Series, Volume 2.
Drive grade. The fact that the drive for each leg of the road trip has only gotten better, we were confident the trend would continue traveling further north on the US 101.
Driving from Newport to Cannon Beach, the route on paper, and minus our pit stops, was around 2.5 hours, the second longest leg of the road trip, but not too much longer than our last leg from Coos Bay to Newport. That consistency only makes sense to get a consistent score, so both points for route difficulty.
Check this out. Up until this point of the road trip, we had traveled around 494 miles. And by the time we reach our last stop of Astoria, we will have only traveled around 627 miles. Not a lot compared to the over 1,300 we traveled on our last road trip series. But the common theme on this road trip of the Oregon coast is that you don't need to cover a lot of miles to see a boatload of spectacular sights.
Yes, the drive to Cannon Beach would be no different. The views and the roadside attractions all worked in conjunction on this leg, as some of the best attractions involved just pulling off to take in the amazing scenery.
That incredible combination of views and attractions was on full display not too far down the road in the beginning of our journey, when we pulled off into Devil's Punch Bowl Natural Area.
This was truly a must-see stop. The park provides a front row seat to travelers looking to experience some of Oregon's best dramatic coastal views.
The massive hollow rock formation shaped like a punch bowl acts like a rocky cauldron, churning powerful ocean water like a giant witch's brew, creating a mesmerizing spectacle of raw power, the same power which created it after thousands of years.
Scientists believe it was probably created by the collapse of the roof over two sea caves. Locals believe it was a hideout for sea monsters. What we know for sure is that the Devil's Punch Bowl is a breathtaking sight to see in real life.
This wonder doesn't just have to be experienced from afar. Visitors during low tide can actually venture down inside to explore the eerie-looking rock formations and tide pools. But this is one of many locations on the Oregon coast and one of just two on this part of the road trip alone where it's important to pay attention to the tide.
While Devil's Punch Bowl is a popular site to whale watch, apparently up the road there's a far better option for whale watching, the town of Depot Bay.
What's interesting about this town is that it's considered the whale watching capital of Oregon coast. In fact, during certain parts of the year, you can see about 10 to 15 whales per day. Wow. Hey, there goes one right there. Ha, sight.
Besides the whale watching, for us, Depot Bay or to mind that we were not far from where some believe a monumental moment in African American history on the west coast of the U.S. happened to take place.
Just south of Depot Bay sits Whale Cove, a beautiful but modest cove hidden behind tall trees and steep cliffs. But according to some, this unassuming location has an important story to tell.
Some say that it was here in 1579 that the first people of African descent ever stepped foot on the West Coast. So why do we say some and not state it as absolute fact, like our story at the beginning of our series about Marcus Lopez, the first black man in what will become Oregon State?
The answer is, it all comes down to documentation.
That's right. See, this belief that Whale Cove was the site of the first black person on the West Coast is connected to the 1579 voyage of Sir Francis Drake, a voyage on its own that comes with a lot of mystery, all due to having no definitive historical evidence ever been documented.
Yes, not only are there conflicting accounts on whether Drake landed in California, Oregon, or British Columbia even, and while it's documented Drake had both enslaved and freed black sailors a part of his crew, none of those accounts mention any of them ever stepping foot on land anywhere.
Compare that to the account of Marcus Lopez, which was well documented through ship logs and other written records, that account of his journey.
This serves as an example of the importance of documenting history, and we can't help but to recognize how traveling, learning, and retelling these stories only reinforce that record, so that their legacies will be around longer for those to hear.
Message!
On this leg of the road trip for us, the pull-offs were great connectors to some spectacular scenery, as well as reminders of some interesting Oregon Black history we've learned through the years. But this leg was also a reminder of the not often talked about constant threat facing the Oregon coast and really the Pacific Northwest coast as a whole.
In fact, it was 5 minutes prior to Lincoln City, in Siletz Bay, we pulled off to a marker that was a pretty explicit reminder. The marker commemorates the Cascadia earthquake tsunami of 1700.
At the time of the eruption, Native American villages occupied the coastline. On January 26, 1700, these people experienced a magnitude 9 earthquake that violently shook the earth beneath them, then followed by a giant wave as much as 40 feet high no more than 20 minutes later.
Along the Oregon coast, there are other reminders of this region's seismic history: ghost forests. These submerged coastal forests once stood above ground until a major earthquake like the one in 1700 caused the land to sink rapidly beneath salt water and sediment to be preserved for centuries.
Mega earthquakes and tsunamis that have occurred for thousands of years in the region, more often than not, was caused by a very precarious fault line not too far offshore.
Y'all, we are in Newport, Oregon, on the beach next to the Pacific Ocean, and look at those huge waves. Crazy.
Yes, in Newport, you will see some pretty big waves, but its proximity to the Cascadia subduction zone does put it in somewhat of a precarious situation.
The Cascadia subduction zone, a fault line that runs 600 miles from Northern California all the way up to Canada. And it's not just any fault, it's a megathrust. That means one giant tectonic plate, the Juan de Fuca plate, is getting shoved underneath another giant plate, the North American plate. Now, here's the problem. They get stuck. And for centuries. And when that pressure builds up to a breaking point, boom.
There have been rumblings from the fault line, even as recent as just a week prior to our road trip, but there's no telling when the next big one will be. According to geologists, evidence indicates that such major earthquakes have occurred at least 7 times in the last 3,500 years, suggesting that these events occur about every 400 to 600 years.
1700 puts us at 325 years since the last one. So it's important for those living on the coast to be prepared. That's why tsunami evacuation signs are a common sight up and down the coast. Yes, the views were amazing, and so were the stops, but the amount of facts to be learned along the way made it even more special. So we're giving 2 points for views and 2 points for quality of roadside attractions.
On this leg of the road trip, there were also quite a few more options for filling up on gas and snacks along the way than there were between Coos Bay and Newport, so we can give a full 2 points here for roadside amenities.
To my delight, the parking was not an issue. It was free and in abundance. I will say that the time of year of our visit may have influenced this positive parking experience this time. Nevertheless, we will give both points for parking.
This final tally for the drive from Newport to Cannon Beach is a clean sweep, giving it a perfect 10 out of 10 score for drive grade. Wow, it's like this drive took the best of what the previous 2 legs of the trip had to offer and made it better where they lacked.
Now, would that trend continue for Cannon Beach in terms of fun? We were excited to find out.
Level of fun. Going into this road trip, Cannon Beach was probably one of the stops that I was most looking forward to checking out. Since we lived in the Pacific Northwest, it was always among the most common recommendations for us to experience. I couldn't wait.
Full disclosure, similar to our parking experience in Cannon Beach, the timing of our visit may have played a part in what our score comes out to, but you will see. Like usual, let's start with the quality of activities.
Actually, Aunt, let's start with the area Cannon Beach shines in no matter the time or season: restaurants. The restaurants in town are all a part of the North Coast Food Trail, and let me tell you, the meals we had here were absolutely delicious, just like Anna's table.
Not lost to us that Oregon is huge for craft beer, and Cannon Beach fits right into Oregon's craft beer reputation with some excellent breweries on the North Coast Craft Beer Trail.
That's why it's an easy 2 points for quality of restaurants. Cannon Beach also makes a great case in regards to special events. The town is host to a bunch of notable events throughout the year, from unique ones like the Cannon Beach Sandcastle Contest, which claims to be the oldest competition of its kind in the Pacific Northwest, to ones that make a lot more sense, like the Spring Unveiling Arts Festival. So both points here.
Okay, now for quality of activities. We've already touched on the options for great restaurants and beer within the town, but what if you're not a foodie? Or you're a foodie, but you're looking for more? In town, there is a way for visitors to experience some of what Cannon Beach is known for.
Cannon Beach has a reputation for being one of the top art towns in America.
Yep, and on the Cannon Beach Public Art Walk, you can see installations like the one behind us all over the town.
We even joined in on the town's self-guided art walk. The installations featured all kinds of artwork. There was a lot to take in.
There was definitely variety, but when it comes to fun, the real standout in Cannon Beach is the nature. Cannon Beach offers a variety of parks that connect to nature in a variety of ways. One of those parks, located in the middle of town, even connects directly to Cannon Beach and American history. Nookus Park.
This was once the site of a prosperous native village. This is also where William Clark and a few men from his expedition met up with local tribes.
One of the parks just 10 minutes outside of Cannon Beach connects to some of the most magical nature experiences by allowing visitors to get up close to sea caves, waterfalls that drop right into the sand, and some of the most beautiful stretch of beach.
But this is one of those locations on the Oregon coast we mentioned earlier, where it's important to pay attention to the tide.
We're at Hug Point State Recreation Site. The views are spectacular, so amazing. But make sure you leave before the tide gets too high, otherwise you might be stuck on the beach.
Still, the park that tops all of the parks in and around Cannon Beach has to be Ecola State Park.
Ecola State Park is home to an old-growth rainforest, jaw-dropping ocean views, and even the Tillamook Rock Lighthouse.
The park's trails are perfect for taking in all that beauty, with plenty of overlooks showcasing those stunning views. We made sure to spend time exploring Ecola State Park, and it didn't disappoint.
But honestly, our favorite nature experience, and maybe our favorite moment overall, was walking along the beach and soaking in the view of Cannon Beach's crown jewel, Haystack Rock. It's one of those sights that's even more incredible in person.
Yeah, the movies don't do it justice. Look, Cannon Beach really is the perfect Oregon coast getaway.
Especially for couples looking for a more romantic destination. Those sunsets, unforgettable.
But for this road trip series, in terms of fun, we kind of look at it like it really didn't stand out from anything we experienced on any of the previous stops or even the drive to Cannon Beach. Again, time of year may be the cause of this, but we are giving only 1 point for quality of activities.
Not so much the activities, but the vibe surrounding the place is what hurts the demographic applicability score. The romantic, sleepy feel of the town doesn't seem like a great place for families with younger kids, so 1 point here.
One thing is for sure, no matter the season, Cannon Beach is gonna be on the more expensive side. It was definitely one of the most expensive stops we made on this road trip. I guess its upscale aesthetics does come at a price, so we're only giving 1 point for affordability.
The final tally for us was somewhat surprising, but the most prestigious of the stops on our Oregon Coast road trip series comes out with the lowest level of fun score so far. We give a 7 out of 10 for level of fun.
Yes, that was surprising. And again, perhaps it was the timing of our visit. But either way, I can definitely see us coming back. But let's see if Cannon Beach can do better against our comfort scale. Comfortability for Black people. Cannon Beach was surprising in regard to the level of fun grade, but we were just as, if not more, surprised in regard to the amount of Black people we seen in town. Look, it wasn't a lot, but we seen them quite a bit, and most of them were locals.
Yes, when pulling off the road and walking into our lodging, it was really refreshing to see a sister work in the front desk checking us in. And a couple other places, Black people were there too. So we are giving 2 points for Black people seen.
Of course, that added to our personal comfort level. But not only that, walking around the town and dropping into the establishments, we encountered some friendly and welcoming people. So just like the previous 2 stops, we can give 2 points for our personal comfort.
Cannon Beach does do better in the previous 2 destinations in terms of visibility of artifacts of inclusion. We actually saw a couple of pride flags around town, so 1 point here.
Unfortunately, that's where the points stop. Not a lot of diversity in the marketing of the destination at the time of our visit, and we couldn't really find any information that connects to any cultural resource groups in or around Cannon Beach. But I will note the conversation I had with one brother living in town, where he indicated that he had nothing but a positive experience living in Cannon Beach and is very happy with his decision to relocate there.
So even with missing out on points from the latter 2 criteria, Cannon Beach still comes out with what's been a consistent score for these Oregon Coast destinations. We give a 5 out of 10 for comfortability for Black people. Look, even though the fun score was lower than what we would expect, we still enjoyed our time in Cannon Beach, and we really do see ourselves going back.
Seeing the iconic Haystack Rock in person outweighs any level of fun score. Yes, our road trip so far has given us a great dose of Oregon Coast nature and beach town culture. But our next stop was going to be completely different from the mall.
Astoria was going to be more of an experience within the city, but what was most exciting, it was a city that features a museum that celebrates its historic connection to cinema, which makes sense because of the city's connection to a very iconic one.
It was just in time too, because the weather was beginning to turn around this part of the road trip. So we were more than ready to find out what an Oregon Coast city experience is like. On to Astoria. The next stop on our Oregon Coast road trip perhaps isn't as world-renowned as our previous stop, Cannon Beach, but for a large part of the population, especially those who came up in the 80s, Astoria, Oregon is home to a very familiar landmark from a generational cult classic, the Goonies house.
Actually, it can be argued that Astoria is as known as Cannon Beach because Goonies was just one of many movies that filmed in the northern Oregon coastal town. But it has to be the city's charm that attracts Hollywood productions, influenced by its Victorian-style architecture.
The Victorian aesthetic almost gives away that this is a city that is packed with history, combined with the continuation of great seafood and spectacular views. But these views are of the mighty Columbia River.
Astoria, like most destinations, has an interesting story that has led to why the city is the way it is today.
A history that you already know we were gonna jump into. Out of all the stops on our Oregon Coast road trip series, it could be argued that Astoria has the most colorful history of them all. Here's why.
For one, Astoria holds the title as being the oldest American settlement west of the Rockies. The city flourished thanks to the fur trade industry.
Early town success based on slinging fur makes a lot of sense, considering the city was founded by John Jacob Astor, the founder and owner of the Pacific Fur Company. Even though the indigenous Chinookan peoples ran an extensive fur trading network long before the Europeans. We'll touch on that later in the episode.
The fur game and contributing to the War of Great Britain and the United States is another reason for Astoria having the most colorful history. Astoria played a major role during the War of 1812. More on that also later in the episode.
The War of 1812 wasn't the only war Astoria was a part of the action. In World War II, the city played a key role in defending the Oregon coast. In fact, Astoria is where the only mainland U.S. military installation was attacked during the war, when Fort Stevens was shelled by a Japanese submarine in 1942.
And then of course there's a Hollywood connection. To be honest, the colorfulness of Astoria's history can be summed up just by its ability to transform itself from a global impacting fur-pushing hub, a popular tourist destination, attracting people and Hollywood with its blend of gritty, artsy, and historic vibes.
Astoria also has a few connections to Black history. On our trip to Astoria, we were excited to experience all of that in the northmost city on the Oregon coast. And the last stop on our Traveling While Black Across America Road Trip Series, Volume 2, the Oregon coast.
Drive grade. For this whole road trip, each leg of the drive has only gotten better, with the last leg between Newport and Cannon Beach getting a perfect 10 out of 10. We weren't sure if it was possible to get better than that.
But we wouldn't be surprised if the drive from Cannon Beach to Astoria somehow figured it out. Even though this would be the shortest drive of the whole series, with an estimated drive time of around 40 minutes.
While just a 40-minute drive straight north up the 101 bodes well in regard to route difficulty, easily getting 2 points there. But with only 25 miles in between the two destinations, this leg would definitely be up against it in regards to roadside attractions.
The fact of the matter is that this leg of the drive has a secret weapon. See, between Cannon Beach and Astoria lays another pretty popular Oregon coast tourist destination, Seaside.
More and more travelers looking for the ultimate beach town vibe flock to Seaside. It is actually home to the state's oldest oceanfront promenade, which was built in 1921, and offers a classic boardwalk feel.
They even host the largest beach volleyball tournament in the world. Yet Seaside offers a lot on its own. What we chose to experience within Seaside was the city's connection to Lewis and Clark's expedition.
Growing up, I heard a lot about the Lewis and Clark expedition. That's because my hometown of St. Charles, Missouri is where the expedition began. So it was really cool getting to experience all these places that they encountered on their journey firsthand.
Yes, living is a whole other level to just hearing about it. Throughout our journey in this part of the coast, we've already encountered some of those locations, like in Cannon Beach, in the village of Nekus, where William Clark would trade with local tribes.
But Seaside represents a really significant milestone of the expedition.
So we're in Seaside, Oregon, where the Lewis and Clark Trail ends.
Here in Seaside, visitors can check out one of the unique locations connected to the expedition, like where some of the members of the expedition spent part of the winter making a vital mineral for the journey home.
During Lewis and Clark's expedition, salt was a very vital thing. In fact, it was looking for salt that established this area right here.
The Lewis and Clark Salt Works marks the place where members of the expedition spent part of the winter making salt, which would be crucial for the return trip home.
Those of you that are history geeks, you can go to nps.gov to find out more about the Lewis and Clark Trail that runs nearly 4,900 miles following the historic outbound and inbound routes of the Lewis and Clark expedition, starting in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and designating Seaside as the end. But that wasn't the end of the story.
Nope, their story on the Pacific coast continued up the road in Astoria, what is now the Lewis and Clark National Historical Park, Fort Clatsop.
Seaside might claim the end of the Lewis and Clark Trail, but this fort right here is where the Lewis and Clark expedition really ended. It's where they took shelter during the winter before they headed back east. William Clark actually drew the blueprints for this fort. And believe it or not, those same blueprints were used to rebuild the replica that stands here today.
The Lewis and Clark expedition wasn't the only story that offered a unique way to connect to Oregon coast history on this leg of the road trip.
We drove 20 miles west off of the planned path to Fort Stevens State Park to check out the part of the Oregon coast maritime history, the Peter Iredale shipwreck.
These are the rusted remains of the ship named the Peter Iredale that ran aground in 1906. The wreck is accessible at low tide, attracting professional and amateur photo seekers, making it one of the most famous shipwrecks of the Oregon coast. The wind was crazy on our visit due to a storm brewing, so our pictures, they weren't the greatest.
Experiences like these that provide an opportunity to connect to significant parts of history, all within a city that's a popular tourist destination on the Oregon coast, is why we are giving 2 points for roadside attractions.
Seaside's proximity also makes it a perfect stop for filling up or grabbing snacks, so both points for roadside amenities. As for views, 2 points still, even in the short distance.
This leg of the road trip from Cannon Beach to Astoria possibly best exemplifies a common theme showcased in this series' drive grades. That distance does not dictate the quality of the drive. We absolutely enjoyed it as much as others.
Even the parking in Astoria was great. Most importantly, free. So for the last leg of the TWB Cross America Road Trip Series Volume 2, we give a 10 out of 10 for drive grade.
Wow, looks like once again we were off to a great start, and we were excited to get to Astoria to see if the fun would continue. One thing is for sure, that drives on this road trip series have been some of the most fun experiences.
But Astoria will be our first experience on this road trip where we wouldn't spend a lot of time on the beach or in nature. This was going to be a different experience, but we were up for anything. Level of fun. As soon as we got to Astoria, it felt more like we were in a historic riverfront city than a traditional coastal beach town. It was evident that this was going to be a totally different experience than the previous destinations on this road trip.
Still in line with the other coastal towns, nature was in reach. For us, it was just right outside of our hotel in the form of mini sea lions that congregate on the docks below. We only spotted them on occasion, but they always let us know that they were there.
That's why our hotel provides earplugs to guests. The switch to more urban experiences was also perfect timing because at this part of the road trip, the weather had taken a turn, meaning any activity outside would be in the rain.
But this time of year, the Oregon coast is still a popular attraction, thanks to a natural phenomenon that tons of visitors flock to experience every year, king tides.
Like their name suggests, king tides aren't just any Reggie tides. These are in fact the highest tides of the year. Swells big enough to make beaches disappear, temporarily changing the landscape right before your eyes.
The major driver of these massive waves, the moon, happens to line up perfectly with the sun and the earth, typically November through February. That's why for a lot of visitors during this time of year, stormy weather is a treasured sight.
Astoria, as you would expect, is a prime location to catch these spectacular waves roll in with the storm. But this is not one of the activities we graded Astoria for in terms of quality of activities.
Inspired by the historic architecture and stories of its colorful history, and the rainy weather, of course, we decided to check out some of the museums within Astoria.
There are plenty to choose from, like the Columbia Maritime Museum. Its location on the Columbia River waterfront is the perfect place for a museum that tells the history of the waterway region known as the Graveyard of the Pacific.
But for our visit, as both of us are fans of movies and what goes into making them, the main museum we knew we had to check out was the Oregon Film Museum.
Thanks to the Adventure and History Pass, we took advantage of a deal that we couldn't pass up. 3 museums for $14.
That meant along with the Oregon Film Museum, we got to check out the Heritage Museum and the Flavel House Museum. This road trip experience was a lot more like the museum experiences that we had on our last road trip series, Volume 1.
Let's start with the Heritage Museum. Housed in Astoria's old City Hall, this museum features 2 floors that tell more of the all-around history of Astoria and Clatsop County than the other 2.
The Heritage Museum also does a great job highlighting more of the culturally diverse stories, as well as some of the colorful and gritty ones, and even the tragic ones.
One of the exhibits we were most interested in viewing at this museum was Blocked Out, Race and Place in the Making of Modern Astoria, which details the complex history of race and the development of Astoria.
Yes, going in, we were looking forward to it, but it was a lot.
Luckily, we had another museum to hit up that would lighten the mood a bit, the Flavel House Museum.
This museum is housed in an 1885 Queen Anne-style mansion that once belonged to one of Astoria's wealthiest and influential figures, Captain George Flavel.
This museum is less about exhibits as much as it's about showcasing how the Flavel family was luxuriously living back in the day. This museum, I would say, would be more for our folks who travel for architecture, I guess.
Finally, it was time to hit the next museum, which for us was the main event.
But where it was housed was interesting in itself.
From 1914 to 1976, this building behind us was actually the operating county jail here in Astoria.
But now it's the Oregon Film Museum that houses some great interactive exhibits.
If you're a history buff, then this museum is definitely for you. The Oregon Film Museum celebrates the state's rich history and films. Did you know that the building it's in was the same Clatsop County jail that appears in the opening scene of Goonies?
This was probably one of our favorite museums because of the fact that it does not just connect visitors to the facts and artifacts of the most iconic films associated with Oregon's history, but it is also interactive. Yes, it is just as fun as it looks to be able to step onto recreated movie sets, touch behind-the-scenes props, and even film your own mini scene. Here's Johnny.
Just like any great film, the Oregon Film Museum lived up to its expectation. But experiencing places from iconic films in Oregon isn't only relegated to the museum. Nope, you can actually drive to locations featured in some of those films.
Yes, at the Film Museum, you can get a map that will show you where those places are, like the school from Kindergarten Cop, or the most iconic of all Oregon film landmarks, the Goonies house.
All in all, we really enjoyed our Astoria Museum Day. Who would have thought?
That's why we can give both points for quality of activities. Now, there are plenty other things to do in Astoria, but even within just the museum experience, we feel that there is something for a variety of different visitor demographics.
That's why we can give both points for demographic applicability. The other criteria Astoria shines in is special events. Out of all the stops on our Oregon Coast Road Trip series, Astoria has the most widely attended and historically significant events. So both points here.
Now, in terms of affordability, these Northern Coast Oregon towns must pay for pricier air, because just like Cannon Beach, Astoria is on the more pricier side. So we only give it 1 point for affordability.
As far as restaurants go, we sort of struggled to find great restaurant options during our time, other than our hotel dining, so only 1 point here. Oh, but we did find a delicious bakery called The Naked Lemon.
And it's Black owned. After tallying all the points, Astoria comes out to a pretty good score. We give an 8 out of 10 for level of fun.
Well, I guess that means that Cannon Beach ends up with the lowest.
Still, the lowest scores being a 7 out of 10 show that the Oregon coast, no matter where you go, it's hard not to have a great time.
As for our comfort score, our bar of expectation was a little lower based on our other experiences. Still, like always, we were excited to put it up against our scale.
Comfortability for Black people. Well, here we are, the final stop on our Oregon Coast Road Trip series, and the final destination being put up against our specially made for Oregon comfortability scale.
Let's start with the criteria that has been consistent within all the destinations on this road trip, our personal comfort. Within Astoria, we encountered friendly people throughout our visit and had a welcoming experience overall. So like the previous destinations, we give both points here.
Other than the friendly encounters, the articles of inclusion also contributed to our comfortable experience. In Astoria, we saw a few pride artifacts and even a BLM artifact or two.
It was by far the most we've seen the whole road trip, so both points for artifacts of inclusion. As for Black people seen, even though we did see one Black woman that owned the bakery and was a longtime resident, we are still reluctant to give any points.
Here's why. Look, we ran into this powerful and courageous sister on the last day on the way out of town. But before that, we didn't even see one other Black person since the first day in Cannon Beach. Shoot, we barely seen them in the films featured at the Oregon Film Museum. So yeah, 0 points for Black people seen.
As for diversity in Astoria's destination marketing, at the time of our search, we didn't find a lot of marketing reflecting a lot of diversity, so no points here.
We couldn't really find any cultural resource groups in Astoria specifically, so no points. But there is an organization that is a great resource for Black people all over Oregon, or those interested in visiting Oregon, the Oregon Black Pioneers.
The Oregon Black Pioneers is a nonprofit organization dedicated to preserving and sharing the history of Black Oregonians. Find out more at their website at OregonBlackPioneers.org.
As for the final tally for Astoria, in regard to our comfortability grade, the scale comes out to a 4 out of 10.
Again, we modified this scale specifically for this road trip. That's because we felt in order to give it a more objective look, we have to look at it with a different lens because of Oregon being a state with a history of exclusion towards Black people.
Although it's ironic and somewhat fitting that the last stop on our Oregon Coast Road Trip series is a place that has somewhat of a connection to the origin of the state's exclusionary law.
James D. Soules, a Black American sailor, lived near Astoria after the wreck of the USS Peacock, the expedition ship that brought him. He eventually moved to the Willamette Valley near Oregon City, where he would inadvertently and unfairly be associated with Oregon's first Black exclusion law of 1844.
The incident is known as the Cockstock Incident. Cockstock was a Molalla man. Customary for the time, he performed labor for a settler in return for payment. In this case, it was a horse.
Cockstock became upset when he discovered that the settler sold the horse to another settler, James D. Soules.
The outrage caused Cockstock to raise a lot of trouble for the local settlers, including Soules, which resulted and a $100 reward being put out for Comstock's arrest.
Not long after, Comstock, along with a few other Native men, came across a settler who he was employed by and who had promised him the horse. A skirmish broke out between the two groups that resulted in Comstock, along with two white settlers, being mortally wounded. The event raised tensions in the region between the indigenous population and the settlers.
Enter in Congressman Samuel Thurston, who would use this as a perfect opportunity to push through his racist legislation. See, the settler that killed Comstock was actually a freed black man named George Winslow.
Thurston would use this and other incidents involving natives and a black settler to ruse fears by associating black people to having an aggressive nature that would continue to incite tensions with the native population.
The fact that Thurston specifically blamed Sewells and not Winslow, the person who actually killed Comstock, reveals the real underlying fear for white men like Thurston. See, James D. Sewells was married to a Chinook woman, and he was known to often associate with native peoples.
The other incident that sparked the legislation and only occurred but a few days prior to it being passed involved a dispute between James Sewells and a white settler in which Sewells allegedly threatened to incite the natives against the settler.
See, that's really what Thurston and the other white men a part of the Oregon Territory power structure feared, an interracial black and native alliance.
For his alleged threat, Sewells was arrested. Less than a month later, the Provisional Government of Oregon passed the first black exclusion law. As a result, Sewells and other influential black men like George Bush would end up in Washington state.
This event of blaming a tragic situation on a group of people and using it as an excuse to round them up, ship them out, and even ban them sounds a lot like what's happening today. Message!
While the exclusion laws is an unfortunate part of the Oregon state history, it also kind of makes our choice and ability to travel and enjoy everything amazing that the state has to offer that much more special. And our road trip up the Oregon coast was special. It was an all-time experience of a lifetime, taking in the natural beauty while experiencing a variety of coastal city experiences.
We can't forget about the interesting lessons in history, especially learning a little more about the rich indigenous cultures. We will never forget this road trip, or we will be back. And we hope that you also consider taking some time to hit up this beautiful part of the country.
Before we left out of the state for home, we stopped by one more iconic Oregon coast landmark in Astoria, the Astoria Columns.
Ironically, the Astoria Columns are also the last tribute to the Lewis and Clark expedition on our trip. We checked out the 125-foot tall monument, took in some views, then hit the Astoria-Megler Bridge to head back home to the state of Washington.
We can't wait for our next road trip. And as always, we recommend you hitting up the open road and experiencing some of the parts of the country you've never been, even if on a whim.
We hope you've enjoyed our TWB Across America Road Trip Series Volume 2, Oregon Coast. Until the next one, beautiful people, stay up, stay true, and do you.